We're recording. Yay! Okay, here we go. Ready for the intro? Let's hope I can speak properly. What do you reckon, 1 to 10, on whether I'm going to be able to articulate this intro, Tim?
I'm going to give it an optimistic 7 out of 10, and I'm going to recommend it for all ages.
Okay, here goes. Welcome to My Turn Podcast, a gaming podcast hosted by extra competitive siblings. Expect news, reviews, laughs and arguments as we take on... No, again. Almost. Hang on, going in for a second time. Welcome to My Turn Podcast, a gaming podcast hosted by extra competitive siblings. Expect news, reviews, laughs and arguments as we take on games across all genres and platforms. My name's Jem and I'm joined by my honorary little brother, Tim!
Bonjour, mon petit chou.
I don't know what that means. Something like hello, small something.
Yeah, hello, my little cabbage.
Oh! If you listen to an earlier edition of the podcast where we talk about drinking games, specifically Eurovision, you'll hear an interesting story about me and a cabbage. But I digress. We're back for a new series, Tim.
We are, thank goodness. And you know what I'm already excited about for this series is that the previous series had quite a lot of video games because we were going through a little thing where we weren't allowed to leave the house very much. But
don't know what you're talking about.
Now that that's easing, we get to actually do some face-to-face gamage, which is what I'm bringing you today, Jen, are 3 quick face-to-face board games inspired by the fact that we did them together in the same place at the same time.
I know, just massive novelty. We were actually together in the same place at the same time. As Tim said, playing physical games that you can touch and stuff. Did we sanitize them? No, I don't think we did. I think we just went for it.
Sanitized ourselves.
That's true.
We there was Jem set up something in the hallway. You had to come through get completely naked. She sprayed you in sanitizer, and then you had to do a little merry jig until you were dried off, and then you were allowed to enter the house. What was the song we had to dance to?
In the car wash, and that's when I got the revolving towelette. Emotion going, yeah.
I was
had
just
one
surprised.
on each arm.
I see. You beat me to it because I wasn't going to say it was attached to your arms. The car wash, shimmy, shimmy, shimmy.
Whoa! Oh, we're back with a new season, but as you're on the show, Tim, we obviously have to sing a song really badly because that's just what we do.
We never plan that bit. It just happens.
Oh, mate, it was so nice to see you again. And thanks for tuning back in, everyone. So as Tim said, we are going to be talking about 3 very quick, short board game titles that we've played. But I wanted to ask you, Tim, something that we've got in the habit of doing is playing a quick warm-up game, a tabletop quickie, if you will, before a big board game session. Do you do that as well?
Yeah, I often have a quickie before a big session. Sometimes you've got a gathering of many people coming to your big session and maybe only one other person has arrived and you don't necessarily want to wait until you kick things off. So you might just have a quick one with them or maybe another person. And
just
then
lube
really
up the brain a bit. Exactly,
yeah. Just to lubricate the old fingers and thoughts. And then really get into it once you've hit critical mass.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally foreplay, isn't it? It's the play before the games.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I see nothing wrong with it. And do you have any particular favourites that you turn to before a big board game sesh? Putting you on the spot,
actually. I do. It can depend on who turns up as to who's familiar. Because I think one of the things about having a quick game is you want the people who are there to already be familiar with it and not have to spend time explaining rules. So it does depend on who turns up. But... I find that King of Tokyo gets played a lot as the first game because that's quite quick and it's a little... You never know which way it's going to go. It's a bit of a scramble. It's quite fun because you get to attack people and it sort of warms up the competitiveness. So that's one. And Another would be a little game called Love Letters.
Oh, I love Love Letters.
Yeah, because again, that's really simple. Even if no one's ever played it before, you can only take 2 actions, and the actions you can take are written on the cards, and you have 2 cards at any one time. So you can't not know how to play it. It's just like pick one of those and get going. Obviously, there's tactics that you learn the more you do it, but it's a simple warm-up game. So yeah, I like those 2.
And I find those kind of games you can sort of have a chat while you're playing it. It's not ultimate concentration. You can't talk to each other because tactics. So you can kind of have your hellos, have a little catch up while you're playing them. My favourite warm-up game is 100% Double. I love Double. It's just such a high energy kind of focusing game, but it only lasts a couple of minutes. And so it just really gets your competitive juices flowing, which is what I love about playing games. I like winning.
Is Double the one with the faces, though?
Not faces. There's only one face, technically, on the pictures, but there are different editions of Double. So Double, its original form, is kind of like Snap, but there's 7 symbols on each card. So they're not... I know, Tim, you're one of these people that has trouble recognising different faces.
Yeah, I think I've played a version of Double where it was faces, and so I never played it again because I can't do it. But if it's just symbols, I'd be okay.
Yeah, there is a face, which is the kind of icon or character which is known as Double, which is this little like purple hand thing. But everything else is like a tree, a carrot, a lock... drop of water. Yeah, I
can recognise a carrot. I can tell a carrot from a lock.
Yeah, I can't believe we haven't played it together, actually. Ariam and I...
Well, next time.
Yeah, my other brother, who's usually on the podcast, who's currently, being a rock star on tour with his band, whatever. He and I play it quite a lot when we're having a sort of big gaming sesh. That's a good warm-up game for us. But he's very clumsy, so when he plays it, cards end up everywhere and it gets a bit aggressive.
Right, you want to warm up. You don't want to blow your load too soon.
True that. And what are the other sort of benefits of these little games that take sort of 5-10 minutes? Would you say?
Well, the alternative for me, there's two things. The alternative for me to it being a warm up game is one. You have a tournament night at home where you line up maybe, 8 short games and you kind of, you have a scorecard of who's winning the games. And so it's like a big game with many games within it. That would be one thing. The other thing, as I will probably mention when we review these, is about the portability of small games. That you can take them to friends and you can take them to the pub. And so often that's what I look for in shorter run games, is how portable are they and how well do they work in the pub. So those are the kind of other uses I have for them.
Yeah, and also how wipe clean.
How wipe clean. That's for everything. That's your mantra. Doesn't matter what it is. Games, clothes, carpets.
I mean, the walls. I'm if you listen to the podcast regularly, I spill things constantly, particularly tea. There is tea everywhere in my house. I'm constantly wiping tea off of things. So if a game card or board can withstand a bit of tea, we're good.
Yeah, that's the tea test.
So Tim, why don't we get into these games reviews? What games are we talking about?
Okay, so the 3 we're going to talk about today are A Little Wordy, which is a word game coming to us from Exploding Kittens. We've got Azul, that you're going to be talking about, because I only witnessed the beginning and then had to run away like Cinderella.
Yeah, that's by Next Move Games, from the brain of Michael Kiesling.
And we're going to round off with Odin's Ravens, which is by game maker Thorsten Gimmler.
A full packed schedule of little bite-sized games. So why don't you kick us off with A Little Wordy, Tim, which we both played together in real life on my table.
Yes, so it is recognisably from the stable of Exploding Kittens, which I'm sure everyone will be familiar with.
The basket.
Sorry?
The basket. Cats sleep in a basket.
The basket?
Just made a joke. It was very bad.
It went, whatever it was, it went well over my head. Do you want me to laugh and you can edit it in later? Wait a minute.
No, it's fine.
Oh,
I mean, I want to hear the laugh just in case. Go on, try a laugh.
Oh, you. So this game is for ages 10 plus, which I agree with. It's for 2 players at any one time. And it takes about 15 minutes to run around once you've learned the rules. It does take a little bit of time to figure out some of the mechanics. It's a word game with tiles, but it is not Scrabble. Crucially, it is not Scrabble. So if you're already tuning out thinking, I don't like Scrabble, I don't want to do this, stick with us and we'll try and explain it. So the gameplay is that you take a pile of letters drawn randomly and you create a word from it. You write it down secretly and then you mix up and swap your tiles with your opponent. And the task is that you have to guess what word they came up with using their tiles. Now you have some bonus cards that can help you. So, for example, the card might allow you to ask for a vowel, what vowel is in the word, what the last letter is, how long is the word, and all of those kind of become part of the strategy of helping you guess the other person's word. As I said, it's very portable, which is good for pub games because it's really, apart from a little board that you can make notes on with a pen, it's just little cards and tiles, so it squishes up into a nice little box and is easy to take to a friend's house, as I did.
Yeah. So talk us through like how the game functions in a nutshell.
So, you have clue cards, as I mentioned, that cost berries. At this point, I should probably tell you that the game is bird themed.
Yes.
Birdie, wordy. The clue cards are designed to look like puns on birds. You have business bird in the top hat, for example. You have hum reaper, hummingbird death, caterpigeon. And as you use these birdie clue cards, they cost berries to use them. So every time you want a clue as to what the other person's word is, they get berries from you. For example, how long is the word costs 3 berries. So not only do you have to guess the other person's word, but you have to finish with the most berries. Ooh. So you might actually guess the other person's word before they guess yours, but if you finish with fewer berries than they do by the time they guess your word, then you still don't win. So you end your game when you guess the other person's word. They can continue guessing if they currently have more berries because they still might win. So it's like 2 games going on at once in a way. Guess the word, get more berries, and that adds that extra level of tactics.
Yes, it really does, because it's not just like Hangman with cute pictures. There is a sort of secondary strategizing going on the whole way through, and it's just sweet, isn't it? It's a sweet sort of mechanic to like collect berries, your sweet little bird cards. I love that.
Yeah, and that's where I say it's recognisably Exploding Kittens. You know, the illustrations, the puns, you can instantly see which house it comes from. I really love word games. Stop saying it. Oh man. So I mean, I love word games, so I could just talk about it as being kind of a great word game. But as I said, I'm aware that some people aren't super.
Yeah, well, let's
so
get
that's why it's
into
good
the
to explore
positives.
that strategy.
What were the main positives for you from this game?
So I think adding that strategic element is a good move for people who don't necessarily love word games. So for instance, it's not necessarily good to have a long word. You know, in Scrabble it would be like, get a long word, score lots of points, etc. But with this one, if I came up with a very long word and there weren't so many possibilities for creating a 7 or 8 letter word out of my tiles, and you found out how long my word was, it actually makes it easier for you to guess. And there's a card, for example, that says, tell me what it rhymes with. So tactically, you're probably better off choosing a sort of shorter or middle word that has a lot of rhymes, because it makes it harder to guess. So that's a key part of it that I really enjoy. It means it's a word game that's not dependent on your vocabulary to the extent that some other word games are. I also like that there's a psychological element to it as well, in that you can try to imagine what kind of word your opponent might pick. So, say for example, I might look at your giggling face and think she's come up with something rude. Like, she's definitely put down a rude word. What would I write if I were Jem? And vice versa, you know. And then that also means that there's an element of bluffing involved, because you can, for example, I might guess a word that's very close to what you've written down, but isn't quite right. But you might not want to show that on your face. So you have to be like, oh, no, I don't know. Well, let me look again. What is it? No, it's not that.
So there's a little bit of poker face going on.
Yeah, exactly. So I say it doesn't demand the same level of vocabulary, but it does come into play if you don't know how something is spelled. And I will leave that hanging for the bit that's not as good. Yeah.
So any other little positives or anything of note that is a kind of not a recommendation, but like a high point, let's say?
I think it's pretty easy to play. I think it's very replayable. It's a great big positive. I think you could keep playing this with many people leaning over shoulders and sort of looking at what other tactics are going on. It's quite a fun one to watch happen as well. But because you can keep changing your tactics, you get different words every time, and you're playing different people. I think it's just got a lot of life in it as a game. So that's another big positive.
I'd agree with that. I think the game's got a lot of longevity, and when we played it was you, me and Erin, and it was quite fun having the ability to sort of swap round and sort of decide whose shoulder you're going to look over, and like, that was close, you know, like you can sort of, it's a fun sort of spectator game in a weird way.
I think it is. I found it a fun spectator game. I think because it's all decision making, and especially if you are able to talk through your decisions while you're doing them, then it's fun for other people to share in, and there's no element of chance really. And I think elements of chance are what can sometimes make observing games a little bit duller.
Yeah, sure. Because you can, with this kind of game, you can watch it and sort of see where, that was actually an obvious, really good thing you could have done, but you chose to do something else. And it's quite fun, like watching someone go in the wrong direction. And also, as we're going to probably get onto, like a bit sort of like, sometimes when, people can't spell things, which we'll come on to.
We've teased it. Shall we?
Let's get into it. So the less negative / more challenging points of the game for some people.
Yeah, so it's the issue really of what happens if you are dyslexic, or you just make a spelling mistake or something. I think, for example, if people have difficulty with spelling and they're playing Scrabble, then they might be given kind of the extra leg of having a dictionary next to them, so they can, look things up and check and so forth.
Yeah.
But we found an example in this game where, because the responses to "is this the right word?" you're just given really the options of yes or no.
Yes or no, exactly.
Does it end in an E? No. But if you basically know that the person guessing has pretty much got the word right in terms of meaning, like there are no alternative meanings to it, but they've swapped 2 letters around, for example.
Yeah, that's what happened to me.
We didn't have any guidance on how to work through that moment. And so we had to kind of talk about it under our breath and go, well, we don't just want to say no, because that's unfair, but what is the protocol in this? So we tried to give hints, and that didn't really work out. No. And then we sort of... And then we decided afterwards, we should just give a more direct signal and just say it's a spelling issue. Yeah. And then you can make up your own, rules regarding that on how you want to play, whether it's that you get another go, or whether it's that you just don't get penalised for that go by having an incorrect guess in which, your opponent gets berries out of it. So I think there are things that they could have suggested for how to get considering... I think it's a very attractive game for people who don't normally necessarily play word games. I think they could have given a little bit more support for people who struggle in that area.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I mean, I'm a terrible speller. I've always struggled with spelling. And it was just the word, I even remember what it was. I wrote the word fiery, but I spelt it wrong with exactly the right letters in the wrong order. Yeah. But in my brain, that's how you spell it. And so I was just so confused by, it's wrong, but it's right. So in my head, I was like, maybe there's actually no E in fiery, because that's how bad of a speller I am. Like, I will second guess all my spellings. And it's just like the way my brain is. So I imagine, as you said, for, you know, people who are quite dyslexic or just like me, like really, really weird with spelling, this is a challenge. But you're absolutely right, Tim. Like a tiny little bit of guidance on that would really help people. And also, one of the really good things about this game is it can be played with multi-generational gaming parties, you know, and there might be people who are like a bit younger who are otherwise quite good at Scrabble because you can double check stuff in a dictionary, but then become a bit nervous about this or have problems with this in a similar way that I did. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing to sort of consider, isn't it, for this game? Because as you say, everything else about it is super accessible and less daunting than trying to play along with Countdown, which I just can't do.
Yeah. And speaking of wipe cleanness, you had a slight issue with the boards as well, didn't you? The scoring boards.
Yeah, I had a little negative with it because I think the design of the boards, as you mentioned, they're so portable. It's really light. They're kind of it's a cardboard net. And then you sort of fold that into a standing structure so that you can hide your word behind a little screen. And then that folds back down again once you've written your word so that there's no chance of your opponent kind of accidentally seeing it. But the surface of the board has been designed with a kind of a plasticky coating, which means that it is meant to be wipe clean. So you can write onto that surface. And then the game comes with a wipe clean marker, or dry wipe marker, I think you call them. So even after, I think, 5 or 6 rounds, as you start to erase the word with a little rubber that's included on the marker, you notice that there's still some black and staining, like really, really quickly. I think, was that the first time you played the game, Tim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the first time.
So stupidly quickly in terms of, you know, we're saying this game has a lot of replayability and longevity in the game design, but the actual kit that it provides you with to write the words on, I don't think is going to last that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, it's also not an essential element to play. Like, you can just, you know, get scraps of paper and write it yourself and turn it upside down. And the paper is useful to have because you do need to make notes as you go along. Yeah. Because if you think you'll remember the answers to the clues, you won't. You have to write down, okay, it's 7 letters, it ends with an E, it has, you know, this, and so it's useful to have paper to write stuff down.
Yeah, and it comes with a little pad, doesn't it? It came with a little pad, did it not?
No, you just those wipe clean boards.
Oh, it's just we just got our own paper, didn't we? I remember writing things down physically.
There's space on the boards to write things down and make notes on, but they didn't give any paper. So yeah, just get your own.
Yeah, it's just I found that strange, and also the sort of plasticky element of it, because it's essentially a cardboard game. It's like that's gonna just sort of degrade and then just be waste. And not really recyclable with that cardboard that plastic coating on it as well. So just something that we've mentioned a few times with sort of cardboard based games. It's just like thinking through, you know, how it ages and then what we do with it when we can't use it anymore. So who would you recommend this game to, Tim?
I really think it's for anyone. Would I personally take the time to try and persuade someone who constantly says they hate word games? Probably not. I reckon there are other games afoot. But I think if anyone's willing to kind of give it the time and patience to particularly become familiar with like the help cards, the birdie cards, and, you know, have a couple of goes with people who are quite sympathetic, then I really think it could be accessed by anyone, and I think it's potentially for all ages as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And even though I had a bit of difficulty with it, I think if we just set some rules ahead of time, it will be totally fine. I did really enjoy it, and I really enjoyed watching it be played as well, as we said. So yeah, I agree. I think I'd recommend it to most people. And did we say how long it took to play around? I can't remember.
About 15 minutes.
Yeah. I think a couple were a little bit quicker as well. But yeah, a really sort of bite-sized, tasty little tabletop. Tabletop? Whoa, that's a different game.
Basket.
All right then, so let's bring it round to your rating of this game, Tim. What would you give this game out of 10?
I'm going to give this one an unashamedly subjective score because I love word games and I love what they've done with the idea of word games here. So for me, it's a 9.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think I'd need to play it a little bit more to give it a fair rating myself. But at the moment, even though I found it difficult, I would still give it sort of around about an 8. So yeah, it's definitely a recommend from us. And we're big fans of the Exploding Kittens basket back catalogue of games.
Absolutely. Great vibes all around from them. So
Yeah,
there was a game played after that I only saw the setup for and then had to run away. So Jem, can you please tell me about the next game, Azul?
Yeah, so Azul is a 2017 board game, as I mentioned earlier, by German games designer Michael Kiesling, and published by Next Move Games, among many other publishers, because it's available all over the world. This game has won tons of awards, so I cannot even get through the list. And it's always recommended as a sort of shorter warm-up game. On things like Board Game Geek, when people do sort of games night recommendations and things like that, I always see this come up. And I was bought this, I want to say Christmas 2019, when we thought we'd be able to have physical games days. And because we went into lockdown, blah, 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 I didn't get to play it until when we were released from lockdown just before summer this year in 2021. But I've played it a few times since then, and it is great. So I'm going to give you a little nutshell about what the game is about.
Please do. Crack your nuts.
So this is a kind of abstract tabletop game, and you basically take turns drafting coloured tiles from suppliers, because you are a tile designer for a palace. That's basically what your kind of job is in the game. So you take turns drafting these tiles to your player board. Later in the round, you score points based on how you've placed your tiles to complete a little tile wall. And extra points are scored for specific patterns and completing various sets. And wasted supplies give you negative score. So there is a bit of strategy in this as well. And the game is played on a lovely little, quite a robust cardboard board that each player gets. So it's a 2 to 4 player game, and each player will have their own sort of cardboard square, and it's a really nice quality board with a lovely tile wall which shows you the pattern of each tile that needs to fill that space. So there's a kind of square space with all these different tile patterns, and you need to get them on there in the right order. Next to that wall, you kind of have what I like to call your stock room. I don't know if that's what it's meant to be, but you're essentially a tile decorator, and so you collect in each round of the game. There are several rounds before the game's complete. You collect as many of the appropriate coloured tiles as possible into your storeroom, and if you complete the lines, they go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So you collect tiles in groups of colour. So some are yellow, some are red, some are mixed colours. As you complete those lines in your storeroom, they move over to decorate your tile wall. So the first player to get a horizontal line will basically cause the game to be ended. And then you add up all your scores. So that the most points scored at the end of the game is the winner.
Gotcha. So I saw, as I say, this being set up, and there were lots of pieces. It looked really pretty, by the way, with all of the pieces. But it also looked like it was going to be quite complicated. So in the gameplay, is it more simple than it sort of first appears and it sounds? Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Super easy. It's one of the quickest games to learn and play. But I totally agree with you. I think because it's so brightly coloured, and actually I'll tell you a bit about what it's inspired by before I tell you about how simple it is to play. It's inspired by the Azul tiles, which were introduced by the Moors to Portugal. and King Manuel I, apparently on a visit to the Alhambra Palace in southern Spain, was like obsessed with these tiles, so he wanted some. So he ordered a bunch of these decorative tiles, and they were traditionally blue and white, but in the game there's lots of different colours. But they then, if you go to certain places in Portugal, you'll see evidence of them there. So the idea is you are the tile laying artist that has the job of decorating the palace, and in the game it's called the Royal Palace of Evora. So it's like this nice little backstory of something that has historical context, which is really nice, but doesn't really affect the gameplay at all, except you can pretend to be a tile layer. But yeah, the game is so simple. So at the start of each round, you have a certain number of like what look like little coasters, but again, they're really beautifully designed little cardboard round coasters, and each of them function as a shop window. And the tiles get laid just out of a cloth bag. Again, really nice quality elements to this game, like lovely thick cloth bag. You take out these lovely tiles which look like sweets. They're really glossy, like really hard, robust, lovely plastic, really beautifully decorated, and those get randomly placed onto the shop windows, which are those little coasters I mentioned. And then each round, all you do is pick the colour you want. So each go is like, I need some blue ones. So, oh, there's some blue ones on that little shop window coaster. I'll take those. And if there's any other colour on that shop window, then they just go into the middle. So the shop windows go round in a circle, and then there's a middle area, which is kind of your discard pile. But once that middle area gets some tiles in it, you can also choose to take from that middle area. And the only kind of restriction of the game is if you take a tile of one colour, you have to take all the tiles in that space. So say you want a red tile and there's 3 red tiles on a coaster, but you only need 2, but there's no other way of getting red tiles, you will have to take all 3 of those tiles. So then you'll have a tile in your discard, which, as I mentioned earlier, does give you some minus points later on, but that's where you can be strategic, because you might find that no one's picking up the blue tiles, for example, and they all end up in the middle. And if you think how many goes until the person next to you goes, and there'll be no more shop window tiles, and so you have to go into the middle, you can kind of strategically do them over by making them pick up like 7 blue tiles, for example, knowing that the biggest line in your storeroom is a 5 tile line. So you can kind of like mess each other over with that if you've got the kind of brain that does a bit of forward planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That sounds like being a mean businessman to force your competitors into overbuying their stock.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and that is literally what it is. You go in there, you're basically on a shopping spree. You're like, yeah, I need some red, I need the blue patterned one, the rest is discard. So you might as well screw your opponents over with your discard.
It's like going wild in Wix. So
yeah,
tell me about
exactly.
So tell me about the best things about this game then.
I've touched on a lot of them already. I think the build of the game, the actual structure of the game, is really high quality. So, exactly in almost opposition to what I was saying about A Little Wordy, is that this game is going to last years. It's so robust, really good quality components. And I feel like that also, for a game that's so hands-on, the fact that the tiles are so tactile. I just realised that.
Oh, mate. Well done.
I know. I'm just full of them today. But yeah, the fact that it's just so nice to handle the tiles, the pieces, just adds an extra sort of dimension to the game, I think. There's nothing worse, and I know we've all been there, where you've got a game with like really fiddly bits, especially like little flimsy bits that just get papery, or like get stuck to your fingers, or they're too small to stand up or balance in the way they're designed to. So it's just really satisfying to have a game that you know is just going to last for years and not fall to bits. And the fact that you've got a lovely cloth bag included as well, rather than loads of those little plastic doobies. I just think it's a really nice touch. And again, that's not going to go anywhere. It's really robust. It's got a nice rope drawstring. It's great. Love it. So I think that side of the game is a huge positive tick. Also, this game is just so fun. And it takes about, it says on the box it takes like up to 45 minutes. We haven't had one that's lasted that long. It's usually about 30 minutes. But it feels quick because you're never really not doing anything. So while someone is picking their tiles, and it takes no time. You pick a tile or you don't, basically. On each go, you're like, which colour do I need? So you just have to pick something. There's not that much liberating. But in the time that someone else is picking, you're adding things up and strategizing. So there's not really any time where you're like, oh, come on, you know? Yeah.
And we've been talking about like replayability of these small games being quite important, obviously because it didn't take long to do it. So did you find that? Is it a very replayable game?
Yeah, 100%. Also because the margins of winning is quite small. As I mentioned, you only need one. So it's kind of I want to say a 5x5 grid. Yeah, it's a 5x5 grid, the tile wall. But you only need to get one horizontal line of 5 to initiate the end of the game. So you're always quite close to doing that. So it's not like one person absolutely runs away with it. So you feel like you've always got a chance of winning. It's one of those games where it will come down to fine margins and often the last lot of adding up at the end of the game. So I think that really keeps you invested. And also, like, if you narrowly missed out, you just completely want to play again straight away.
You want to go again.
It's
It's quite Moorish then. Look, if you're going to do puns, I'm going to do puns. That's the deal.
That was a good pun. I like that. That was actually funny.
All right, let's talk about the stuff that didn't go down so well then.
I've only really got one negative for this game, and that is the adding up of points. So it's not just as straightforward as one tile in place on the wall equals 1 point. There is some weird points addition that happens if tiles meet in and create an extra part of a horizontal and vertical line. So like, for example, if you add a tile and that creates an L shape on your tile wall, where previously there was just a vertical line and a horizontal line that weren't touching, then you add both of those together, counting that adjoining tile twice. But it's a bit confusing when you're moving tiles across from the storeroom into the wall. You sort of have to add them up line by line, because otherwise your brain is like, hang on, did I already add that? Because every round your wall gets more populated with tiles. So sometimes if you're getting a bit carried away, or let's say you've had a drink, you can't...
I can't imagine such a scenario.
You sometimes can't remember if you counted that from the round before or the round you're currently on. So your brain does kind of go, ah! So there is a bit of mental gymnastics demanded in the way that adding up works. But the end adding up is fine, because it just gives you, on the board, it actually shows you what the kind of points advantage to how many like vertical lines or diagonals or whatever that you have. There's some bonuses that you can get. And that's pretty straightforward at the end, because you know you're done. But it's like as you're going through the game, yeah, it is a little bit like, did I add that twice? Oh God, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it's,
I understand.
You know, yeah, it's if you just do it one row at a time, which is what you're meant to do according to the rules, and don't get carried away adding all your points up all in one go, then it's fine. You just got to keep an eye on it. And that's my only negative.
Keep a level head and a level spirit level when
don't
you're
get too drunk.
Is the moral.
Yeah.
All right, so recommendations. Who's this for?
I really think this game is for anyone. Like with the adding up, a similar caveat to the thing with spelling. If there's someone who struggles with adding up, then someone just volunteer to help them fairly, you know. But other than that, I'd say this game is recommended for 8+, I think. Just double check that. Yeah, 8+. I think that's about right, you know. And it's up to 4 players, but 2 players is great for this game as well. So you can really go head to head and enjoy yourself. So yeah, anyone. It's a really good family game. Yeah, anyone.
Do you think Steve and Tyler and Liv Tyler would enjoy playing this as a family game?
I mean, they're already Tylers, so why not be Tyler for a palace?
Do you think Mary Tyler Moore would enjoy playing this game?
I hate you.
All right, just give it a mark out of 10.
I'm actually going to give this a super high mark. I'm only docking it a little bit because of the adding up complications. I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. I really love it.
Big scores today.
Yeah.
Big scores. I like it.
Absolutely love it. And there's lots of different versions as well, and they're all gorgeous. So you can buy one that's like mosaics and one that's like a glass ceiling or something. I just made that up. But there are lots of different versions and they're very cool.
Well, you were talking about how you don't necessarily need to embrace the Portuguese culture of the tiles to enjoy the game, but as we probably know by now, I very much do like to embrace that. So I would be putting on some fado music, and I would be drinking some port along with it. Classic ruby port as we go into winter, but probably a white port and tonic in the height of summer.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, Tim, actually, because at the end of this podcast, I'm going to ask you to suggest a drinks pairing for each of the games that we're talking about.
Oh, okay. I'll hold off on the other two then.
So,
I was just going to do that.
Yeah, and I'll say why at the end of the podcast. But if you want to know a drinks pairing for each of the games, listen to the end and Tim will enliven your taste buds with the perfect pairing.
All right, hold off on that one. Well, then let's get to the final game so we can get on the bebs.
Yeah, what is it, Tim?
Okay, so this game is called Odin's Ravens. Now, the little story you need to know behind this is that Odin is a Norse god, the All-Father. He had two ravens who liked to perch on his shoulders, Hugin, which means thought, and Munin, which means memory. And every morning...
Hugging and moaning.
Hugging and moaning for
the layman's.
For those of the Bexley Heath persuasion. Every morning, Odin sends his ravens out to fly around Earth, around Midgard, and to listen out and gather the news for the day, and they fly back in the evening and they let him know what's been going on. That is the premise of this game. Mm-hmm. So 2 players... each playing 1 raven, fly opposite ways around a 32 space playing field, trying to be the first one home. That's it. That's your premise.
Very nice. And how does the gameplay work in a nutshell, Tim?
So it's a race game. Mm-hmm. You go space by space, but playing entirely with cards. No dice racing. The game is all cards, very, very portable, apart from 2 little wooden ravens, which are your play pieces. Mm-hmm. So as I say, it's created in 2016, Thorsten Gimmler, recommended for 8+, and around, it says, last 20 minutes. I find it can go a bit quicker once you get used to it. It can be quite a fast-paced game. The layout then, so the board, there's no actual board. The board is created by cards. So there are 5 different types of land card. Like river, mountain, forest, etc. You see that in all sorts of games.
River deep, mountain high. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
We're getting there.
Go on.
So you lay out the land spaces so that none of them repeat, and that means that everyone has the same advantage when they're racing around the board. And then you have terrain cards, which can match the land cards. Mm-hmm. And you play that to move forward across the land, usually 1 space. But if you get 2 of the same land cards next to each other, then you move across both spaces. Or if you get 3, you move across 3 spaces. If you have 2 of the same colour terrain cards, you can play them as though they were 1 other colour. Mm-hmm. What that means is there's almost never a time when you can't move. You keep moving, you keep putting down cards all the time. So it's a very pacey game, and you can't collect more than 7 cards anyway. So you have to kind of keep playing all the time, and that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are 8 Loki cards, which you need to be aware of. Of course, this is a Norse game, and the trickster god is going to appear. And these tricks allow you to shift the land spaces, or move yourself, or impede your opponent. Mm-hmm. So, for example, by building a bridge to make the other raven have to fly further around, or you can twist land types so that you can move over several of the same spaces in one go, as I described earlier. Mm-hmm. And this is where the tactical elements really come in. It's in trying to think whether, by giving yourself an advantage early on, for example, that might then be beneficial to your opponent in the second half of the game when they're coming back down the track that you started on. So you have to think quite carefully about what's going to help you. Will it also help your opponent as well? Understanding how the Loki cards work is really the majority of the setup time. Yeah. But what they do really well is they give you little diagram reminders on the cards, so that does help. It's once you've read through it once, you don't really need to read them again. You can kind of understand what they all mean.
Yeah, it was really quick to learn. Yeah, it was really, really quick to learn, just to pick up on that point. And like for me, when you first brought it over and I looked at it and watched it being played with you and Erin, first of all, in my head, like the way I understood it, it was kind of dominoes, like because each card has got that split of the different lands. It's kind of dominoes, but dominoes being used as a bridge to get forwards. So like you're sort of constantly turning it around to match the domino next to it. Like in my weird brain, that's how I learned how to play it really quickly. I was like, it's bridge dominoes.
Yeah, you're right. It is very similar to that. It's like playing dominoes, but moving along the track as you go.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean by bridge, not the game bridge. Like, as in, it's your road. The road dominoes. Yeah. There we go. That's better. So, talk us through the biggest positives of this game, Tim.
Well, as we just mentioned, really, I love the simplicity and the speed of the game. Also, every time I've played it, because I played this one a lot more than the others that we mentioned. You only really win or lose by a few steps. So there's no feeling of inevitability to the game. It can turn around really quickly. You might think you're far behind, but all of a sudden everything falls into place for you, especially if you've saved up some of your trick cards. And everyone gets an even number of turns. So even if someone made it home first, the other person gets another go to try and make it home as well. So you can tie in the game.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm completely fine with if you want to like end in a tie. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What it most likely means is you're just going to go around again. You're going to play the game again because it will go faster the second time, and you want some kind of result. So very, very replayable because of its simplicity and speed and portability.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that, I think this is a booze-friendly game because it's so visual, isn't it, that just you're not doing the sort of adding up that I mentioned in Azul.
No, it's not particularly taxing because you have to play something. There's never really a move you make that's really terrible. It might not be the best move, but it's not bad. You're still going to move forward probably, and I think that's for those kinds of minds. I think that's quite encouraging.
Yeah. So enjoy with a drink that Tim's going to mention later. So, what, if any, were the negatives of this game for you?
Well, because it is such a visual game in a lot of ways, that leads me on to something that I thought wasn't quite up to scratch, which is the designs of the cards. So they've obviously gone for, these sort of Norse swirly designs, and the colour palette is all of a quite similar earthy tones. So there's very little difference, for example, I think, between, the purple and the blue, maybe, for example, and then the green. What that means is it can be quite difficult to play in low light conditions if you want to take it to the pub, for example. It's a great pub game, but actually in low light conditions, you're going to end up doing a bit of squinting and double checking. Or also, if you have visual difficulties distinguishing between similar colours. Also, sorting between the cards, because the back of the cards have very similar patterns. And actually, that just kind of separating card from card and putting them in the right piles took half of the
longer
game
than
time,
the game,
which it shouldn't. So, I think the design could have been a lot simpler, a lot bolder, and use easier symbols for people to understand more quickly. So that's my criticism of that. I don't think the design is as accessible as it could be.
Yeah, even just like a bold colour differentiation, illustrations aside, even if you went off bold colour difference rather than this kind of, as you said, muted sort of earthy palette, that would just help, I think. But yeah. Right, so who would you recommend this game to, Tim?
Oh, absolutely anyone. It's so simple. It's so simple to learn. It's simple to play. As you say, because it's got that Dominoes vibe to it, which has got to be one of the first games everyone learns to play anywhere in the world, I would think. I think it's super accessible for anyone.
Yeah.
And
What is the age?
Can I add on that to
go on.
not? Yeah, it's 8+. It says, although I think younger is absolutely fine. But can I add on that in terms of the recommendations that although I enjoy the Norse aspect of it and the ravens and all that kind of vibe, you're not about to enter a world of Game of Thrones or Warcraft or any of those other sorts of games. It's kind of like you said, the theme of the previous game is sort of incidental in a way.
Yeah.
Same as here. It could be any land type, it could be any bird. So don't be put off if that's not your thing.
Yeah, like this and Azul, as you're saying, it's like inspired by a story, but absolutely don't be put off by it. And I would extend that to something that Erin and I mentioned when we reviewed Lords of Waterdeep, which is don't be put off by the art design on the box, which is it feels very high fantasy. It feels like, yes, it's referencing Norse mythology, but the art style feels like someone who's really into reading hardcore fantasy books. Those kind of covers, if that makes sense. Yeah. So don't be put off by this. This is an accessible game. As Tim said, I would also recommend it to anyone. It's really good fun and really quick, fast paced, and definitely gets you warmed up for a good sesh. So Tim, what would you rate this out of 10?
For me, it just loses on the design accessibility, but it gains points for how replayable and portable it is. So it's another 9. It's a high scoring day.
It's a high scoring day. I love it. So that brings us to, I was going to put you on the spot, but you had a little pre-warning. Tim also has another podcast called Thinking Drinking. What's that about, Tim?
It's about drinks, trivia, and social history. So I can promise you that there are no tasting notes going on, although we do drink throughout it. But it's mostly about kind of historical nuggets, sometimes a little bit of chemistry, lots of kind of cultural tales behind some of your favourite drinks and some of the more obscure ones. And we sort of look at it globally and through all sorts of periods of time.
And that is why I was going to ask Tim for a very special new addition to My Turn podcast, which is, Tim, what tasting pairing would you recommend for the games we review? Are you up for this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like this is the skill I was really born to demonstrate to the world. Me
too. Because Tim is like, I mean, we're siblings basically, and Tim is always one for making sure the atmosphere is fully kind of realised, not just in the games you play, the places you go to, but also what you're wearing and, more importantly, what you're eating and drinking. So Tim, I'm going to challenge you to give us a drinks pairing for playing A Little Wordy.
Oh, now you see, A Little Wordy was a little bit difficult, more difficult than the other two, because I had to think through this, birds, drinks, how do they go together? Something to do with the drinking bird that kind of tips its head up? No. Anyway, what I came to is that, part of the goal is that you're meant to be collecting berries as tokens and points. So I thought a berry liqueur, like a cassis.
Cassis! Oh, I knew he was going to say that.
So, look, you can have it as a little aperitif. You could pour it over some ice cream, maybe, if you're having a little party game. Or you can make a delicious cocktail. But
Bramble, isn't it, with cassis, I think?
Yes, exactly. But yeah, definitely cassis in some form.
Love it. Which moves us into Portugal for Azul. You already mentioned...
I did. Well, it's got to be port for Portugal, hasn't it? But as I mentioned, I think most people would be familiar with the Ruby and Tawny ports, which are wintry. But if you're playing it in the summer, go and try some white port. Have it chilled with some tonic water. That's a delicious way to have port throughout the entire year, which I can heartily recommend.
I want some now. Oh, so refreshing. And last but not least, what would you pair with Odin's Ravens?
I'd feel remiss if I didn't suggest mead to go with a traditional Norse game, a great big stone tankard, if you can get it, of some mead or a wooden barreled one. What I will say about mead, just to kind of, because I said, you might be one of these people who doesn't like all this Norse stuff and etc. It's not so much that the Norse drank more mead than everyone else, and they were the only people to make it. Mead is made in every culture in every country in the world because everyone has access to honey and bees. It's that they didn't drink wine. The environment, the climate was not good for viticulture. So whereas everywhere else also kind of had wine to balance out the things they were drinking, the Norse really only had ales and mead, and that's why we kind of picture them with that.
Oh, and I love mead. I love like a spiced mead in the winter, slightly warmed. Oh, yum! Oh, it's just making me want booze now, Tim.
Yep. Have you ever had a mead warmed up by a hot poker?
I don't know why I would have.
It's a traditional way to do it. So rather than putting it on like a stovetop or something, you have like a barrel of mead and you fire up a red hot poker and you just plunge it in, and that's how they used to heat it up.
No one can see my face right now, but I'm terrified.
If you can get one of those for a games night, that's what I'm saying. If you want to go the full hog, let's get a red hot poker, barrel of mead, plunge it in. I mean,
I could probably get you a kebab skewer. Being of Turkish heritage, I've got a few of those lying around, but I don't know about poker.
Sounds great.
Well, I think that brings us neatly, somewhat terrifyingly, to the end of the podcast. Who's got a hot poker lying around? Anyway, right. Oh, I've just got Vlad the Impaler in my head. Oh, I'm not going to go there. I think Tim's broken me today. But thank you so much for joining us for season 5 of My Turn Podcast. Wow, 5 seasons. We've been doing this a long time. Woo, woo, woo. So thank you very much, Tim, for joining me. And thank you for listening along. If you have any board game recommendations for us, please get us on Instagram is where we're most active. We also have Twitter, just My Turn Podcast. You'll find us. Just like suggest stuff away, get in the DMs, because we are looking to take on as many board games as we can before we're locked away again, which I hope never happens, but you know, the world. But thank you so much for joining us. If you feel inclined in your heart to give us a 5-star review, that would really help. Also, please subscribe and share this podcast with your fellow gaming geeks, because we just love games so much, and we know you do too. So let's just share the love. We enjoy it, you enjoy it. Recommend us some games, it'll be ace. So I think goodbye is where we're at now. So thanks, Tim. See you later.
Thank you very much. Au revoir, chickpea.
Basket. Bye.
Bye.